PC Voyage. I'm Rainy Laviolette. Tonight we're doing a special edition featuring this new PC with Glenn Trim and Ernie Savoy. As you know, they've spent many days working on this PC, and tonight you're going to see several segments on them building the PC. Now here's Glenn and Ernie.
Hi, I'm Ernie Savoy.
And I'm Glenn Trim.
And this is this new PC. In our last segment, we took a 486 motherboard and we installed it in this case and did that successfully. It's now wired up and we're ready to add cards into for our video monitor, our hard drive setup, and anything else that we need to do here. So we'll start with that. And I think the first one we're going to put in here is in fact the video card. And since that's a VESA card, well, I'll let Glenn pick up on that.
Right. This is the video card, and this is a VESA card, and you'll notice that it has this long connecting board here. This is the VESA slot, and that goes into one of these little brown connectors on the end, and we need to have a longer edge connector in order to use the full function video. It has a huge bank of memory chips on it and will allow us to do many great things with our video. The card will install in like this, and it will screw down with one screw. We first have to take off the blanking plate that's in the case, and we'll take care of that right now.
Okay, that's simply held in by one screw, and there is.
And it falls right out.
That's the plate that's out. Now I'm going to put this down because I don't want the screw falling into the case. Screw is out, and we're now ready for the card. Glenn's going to ground himself, and we'll start from there.
Always handle the cards by the edges and never handle it by the connecting edge itself. It's going to snap right into place, and it does take a little effort and a little rocking to get this in place.
Just have to be persistent, particularly with newer motherboards. There's gold leaf connectors inside the ports that you saw in there, and they're going to squeeze against the edge of that knife edge on the card to make the connection. So by gently rocking it back and forth, you will slowly insert the card. Now Glenn has it all the way in, and you know it's all the way in. We'll hold this back up again. When the back plane, there's a little lever on it, is flush. Okay, now at that point we just line up the screw hole and we screw it down, and that card is installed.
Now the key word here is firm pressure. You don't want to force the card because you can crack the card or the motherboard or both and damage the components. You do want to force it in so it goes all the way into the slot, so that when we tighten the screw down, the screw is not tightening and forcing it further in. It should be in place when it's ready to go.
And that card is installed.
And that's all there is to that. The next card we're going to do is going to be the I/O card, or the input-output card. And that, again, will give us connections to the outside of the case for serial and parallel ports. And we have an extra set of ports right here that will connect in an empty slot further up the board. So again, we have to take the cover off the slot that we're going to use, and we've chosen to put it in number 2. And the next one down is going to be the extra connectors that we've got here. These connectors will plug in on these 2 pin sets here, and that will allow us to have 4 connections off of one card. All right?
Okay, whenever you're ready. This card is an 8-bit card, which means it's using one of the smaller slots in the machine. And most motherboard manufacturers, if they do include 8-bit slots, will always put them closest to the power supply. That's another way of telling. Once the card is in place, we'll screw that down, and then we'll put the other back plane that has the extra parallel and serial connection on it.
We're all set to go, right?
Right. So I need a screw.
Okay.
There is also on this card a port for joystick for people who are going to be using their machines partially for entertainment, for getting a joystick. It's a 15-pin plug-in, and joysticks run anywhere from a few dollars all the way up to several tens of dollars, if you want to put it in general terms. I'm going to remove the next slot cover, and then we'll hold up the machine to show you the card inserted and the other slot cover off, so you can see how we're lining everything up inside the box.
Now, the 2 connectors we have here are both serial connectors, but you'll notice that they're different sizes. One is a 9-pin serial connector and the other is a 25-pin serial connector. Both of them do this essentially the same job, but a lot of serial port connections from peripheral devices come with different size cables, and that's why we have both sizes here. This is not going to pop into a slot, as you can see. We're just going to drop it in place and put the screw back, and that's going to be mounted. And once that's taken care of, we'll connect the cables to the card, and this entire operation is finished. These cables are going to wind up being COM1 and COM2 depending on where they plug in on the board, and it really doesn't make a difference which one's which. It will make a difference, however, as to which edge of the cable this red stripe goes on the pins. On the card there's a pin marking that marks pin 1. The stripe always goes to pin 1. Now, if Ernie has better eyesight than I, he's going to take a look and see where pin 1 is and plug it in.
Okay.
There's one, and there's the second. And we're all set to roll.
And there we are with our I/O card in the machine.
All taken care of. The last card we need for basic system is the one that controls the hard drives and floppy drives, and you can see that it's quite small, and it has 3 connectors. One is for the hard drive and 2 for floppy drives. And if you'll notice, I don't know if the camera can focus in this close, but one says regular and one says 2.88. This particular card is designed to handle 2.88 megabyte floppy drives. And by doing so, we'll have an expansion for the future if the 2.88 drive becomes very popular, or we can use this connection for a tape drive connection. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to pop this right in place. And we have a slot already open. Okay, here we go.
All right. We'll pop in a screw, and then we'll be ready to start putting in our drives and cabling up.
The particular case we're using has a drop-off front. Some cases you have to undo a screw to get here, and in this particular case we don't. We have 3 tabs that we're going to pop open, and the whole front part of the machine just comes loose. So that comes off so we can get out our drive bays and put the drives in. These 2 metal tabs pop out, and those are in order to keep the electromagnetic radiation away from in the machine and not outside the machine. So the first drive we're going to look at doing is going to be our floppy drive. This particular drive has both in one. It has the 3.5-inch and the 5.25-inch both in one machine. You can get separate drives, and many times you'll find that their separate drives are about the same size as this. Sometimes the smaller drive will be actually a smaller machine, and there are smaller slots for that in some of the cases.
When we were making a decision about what type of drives to get and what type of other devices we were going to put in the machine, we found out we ran into a common problem that most people out there experience, is almost every case that you're going to find only has 2 or 3 exposed slots. And when you're looking to run multiple type devices that you have to have access from outside the computer case, you begin to have to look at what options you have. Glenn and I decided that since these were now available, these dual floppies in one footprint, that instead of going with an external type drive for either our CD-ROM or our tape backup, which are things we will eventually add to the system, that we would make this compromise here and get both drives in one unit. That will allow us still to put 2 other exposed devices in this machine.
Before we can mount this drive, we have to mount the rails on it because this is a rail-type mounting device. Not all machines are so mounted. Some you just slide the drive in and put screws in from both sides of the mounting chassis. But we're going to put this together this way. Now mount the rails where they belong and put the screws into the holes. I'm going to put a hand on that, Ernie, so we don't let it fall over. Once you get one mounting rail, it tends to be a little unstable.
I think a point that we need to make, Glenn and I have put together a lot of machines, and we tend to be a little bit more comfortable in doing it, but it is not a two-person job. Anybody that has the basic tools, the screwdrivers and the pair of forceps and a light, can basically go out, get the pieces, and put them in there. The decision-making processes that you go through will also determine how difficult some of these items are to put in. In this case, this case allows us a lot of flexibility in that everything snaps in. There are very few things that you actually have to physically screw into the case besides the motherboard.
Now, because all three of our drive bays are exactly the same size, we could put it physically in either one of the three positions that we have here. We're going to choose to put this in the top position because as a desktop-mounted unit with the keyboard probably in front, that's going to be the easiest access for the discs going in and out with the least likelihood of breaking something. So we're going to line it up in the drive slots, and you'll notice that when it goes all the way into position, it clicks in. That's all there is to it. Now we cable it up, and we put power into it, and those floppy drives are all set to go.
This drive does not use a standard D cable for power. It's using a more modern modular type power supply, but we want to make a consideration here. There are a limited amount of power leads in this case. So what we're going to attempt to do is, with a little bit of thought process, decide on how we're going to set up our power distribution in the case so that we optimize use of the plugs. In this case, at least two of the power leads have bridges on them or extended arms. Either of these can be used for floppies. In this case, our floppy drive uses a small plug. So we will take this power lead and we're going to use it to connect our floppy power supply. And that'll take a second here.
Once we've got the power cable connected, we then need to connect the cable for the data that travels in and out of the drives and plugs onto our card, which we've mounted in on the motherboard. The cable that we're using is set up to work either edge connectors or pin connectors and an A and B drive setup. This particular dual drive does not need more than one connector. Well, if you have two separate physical drives, you are going to need to have two separate physical connections. You'll notice that on this cable there's one section that is twisted. That always denotes an A drive link. Beyond that, the inner piece denotes the B drive link, and thereby, depending on which way you plug in your two floppy drives, will determine which is the A and which is the B.
The cables, again, have marked on both ends, and I don't think you'll be able to see it on camera. But in pin position number 1 on the plastic fittings on both ends of the cable, there's a little arrowhead. And also on one edge of the cable, there's always a red imprintation or a blue or some type of printing, and you may be able to pick that up on camera. That is always your number 1 position, so you always have to make sure that that's aligned with the number 1 pin on both your drives and your controllers. So we'll take this, and do you want to do the honors this time?
Sure. We're going to plug in our cable, and it tends to get kind of tight in here, so I'm going to back my drive out just a little so I get a little more working room. And we want to make sure the cable's got a nice easy path, so we want to make sure it's not crimped or bent drastically. Even though it's a fairly flexible cable, you can break the cable and cause a problem with it. So there's our cable, and then onto the board, and we'll plug that right in here. Okay, and we're all set. That's it for this segment, and we'll see you next time, and we'll finish putting this thing together. I'm Glenn Trent.
And I'm Ernie Savoy, and this is this new PC.
Thanks, Glenn and Ernie. We're going to get back to them here in a minute. But next up, we've got Keith Davis with Bits and PCs. Here's Keith.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Bits and PCs. Today we're going to talk about using various utility programs along with other programs in your computer. And we're going to talk about what these utility programs are and why you would use them. When you get a computer, we think of getting software that's major software packages like Lotus or WordPerfect or large programs like that. But there's an awful lot of nice small utility programs, they're called, that help you do a lot of miscellaneous tasks with your computer and help your computer look better and work a little bit faster and smoother. And you find a lot of these utility files on shareware disks and at your local computer fair or on local bulletin boards. And once you get a computer and you start using it, you find that some of these little programs that people have written can be very helpful to you. And we'll take a look at some of the favorite ones that I like here and what they do. So let's take a look. We have one here called CG Clock. And if you look in the upper right corner of the screen, there's a little clock going up there. And it says it's 9:02 p.m. And Jeff says the studio is closing in a few minutes, so we have to do this segment here. But this is a little clock, and it's not up there because the computer is on, or it's not automatically included with the computer. It's a small file that's in one of the directories on the hard drive here, and we have to tell the computer to install and run that clock when the computer boots. And that's a very common thing, to have these little background utility programs running, and you get them running in the background in your auto-exec file when your system boots. In fact, what we can do is take a look at our auto-exec file here, and we'll see how we do this. The clock, and the command for it is right here. Here's cgclock.com. It's located in our DOS directory where the path is set to, right above here. And we load high LH. That's the command that gets it out of conventional memory and gets it out of the way, so it's not taking up any of our memory we need for our programs. And as we can see, it's in the auto-exec. It's one of the first lines. And by doing that, that clock will come up in the corner when the computer starts. And so that one's a nice one because it beeps every 15 minutes. And you can also toggle it off by typing CG Clock again. We'll turn it off if you need to turn it off temporarily. Another little file that I like, and this was more for some of the older computers that have EGA monitors. There was a little file someone wrote called New Font, and it changes the style of the lettering a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to read. In fact, the letter you see on the screen now is produced by New Font. And again, this is a small program that someone has written, and in the auto-exec file, it turns it on so that any text we see on the screen comes up in a little different way. In fact, I can show you real quick what it looks like with and without it. If we toggle it off and we do a directory here, we can see that we have the standard IBM compatible lettering, sort of kind of thick letters, and not too bad, nothing wrong with that. But now when we run New Font and we do the same directory, we get a little different style lettering. So it might be more pleasing to the eye. Now, what other little utilities do we have here? There's another one that is in the auto-exec file, and let's find that. And that's called IOMON, and that's down here at the bottom. This is called, this stands for Input Output Monitor. And what this does is it monitors activity that goes on between disk drives and disk directories as files are copied or moved from one area to the other, or as data is read or written to the disk. And what happens then, if we look in the upper right corner of the screen here, what I'll do is I'm going to go to the DOS directory, and let's copy a bunch of files. We have a temporary directory set up, and let's watch what happens in the upper right corner of the screen here. You see there's a little wheel turning up there, and there's a W and an R, and it says it's reading and writing data. And this is a good indicator of what's happening, and it's useful in offices, for instance, that are very noisy and you can't hear if the disk drive is working or not. And you can see that it's actually transferring the data. Let's do that one more time. And the W means it's writing the data, and the R means it's reading the data. So that's a nice, useful little utility program. And that's it for this week's Bits and PCs. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Keith. Now let's get back to Glenn and Ernie and this new PC.
Hi, I'm Ernie Savoy,
And I'm Glenn Tram.
and this new PC. In our last segment, we added floppy drives to the 486 system that we're building, and we put most of our controller cards within the system. In this segment, we're going to be adding a hard drive and a cooling fan to the processor, and we'll be at the point where we can power this guy up. So, Glenn, if you'd like to talk about the hard drive, let's get going here.
Okay. The hard drive is going to mount laterally on this, on its side, as opposed to many units where it mounts flat in the drive base. And where it mounts really isn't a real issue here. It's knowing where to mount it and how to put it together. So this one has a single screw to get loose, and when that comes out, then this slides back off its clips, and we'll mount this right to the hard drive and then slide it all back in place, and it'll mount right in the system. There are 4 screw holes in the bottom of these chassis, and you'll notice that on these drives they also have side mount screws for standard mounting, so that it can mount into a standard bay with or without the rails. Once we've done that, we're going to put the cable on this, again pin 1 orientation, same as we had before, on the stripe side of the cable. And we'll connect it to our card, which is already in the machine. So I'll get the screws and put that together. Ernie, why don't you start on the cooling fan?
Okay. With most of the later processors, and I'm going to lift the case up so people can see here, the CPUs, because of the density of the actual circuitry inside, these are literally thousands upon thousands of transistors that are microscopic in size and encoded within a piece of wafer of silicon. The more you use the processor, the more heat it generates. So what we are going to do with this processor to make our CPU last a little bit longer is we've got an accessory. It's a little cooling fan. It snaps right over the top of the CPU chip itself, and then it plugs into one of our standard power supplies. So give me a second here, and I'll get that in, and then I'll show it to you. Okay. I snap that right onto the CPU chip itself, and then I'm going to take the power leads, and I'm going to grab one of our multiple power leads coming out the power supply. And again, it's a D connector, it can only go on one way. Snap it in, and when I power on the CPU, the fan, or the power supply, the fan on that CPU will start up and help keep that chip cool. You don't necessarily need to do that. It depends on your application. Since we're planning on running a lot of CAD applications on here, a lot of CPU intensive type operations on this machine, we decided that for the minimal amount of cost it was for that accessory, it was more than worth the price of a replacement CPU down the road.
Okay, again, we connect the cable with the proper pin orientation to the stripe, and the power lead is going to go right on here. It's the same type power lead we used on our floppy drives, and it's going to come right in here. There is an up and down on these, so there's a beveled edge on one side of it, so that the power plug only goes in one way. And once that is firmly in place, we will then take our drive and mount it in place.
Let me get those cables out of your way. One of the points we had made in an earlier program was that we had chosen the desktop case because of the amount of equipment we were putting into it. We knew that with a tower case we would be having problems with cables getting in the way. And even with a desktop case, as you can see, you know, we can use all the hands that we can get. It doesn't mean that you need more people doing it. It just means that you have to think a little bit ahead of time what you want to do and where you want to place the components you're putting in the case itself. Now that hard drive's all mounted. The only thing that's left to do is hooking up the cable to the controller.
Again, there's a pin 1 orientation on this controller, just like there is on the drive itself. Once you get the pins lined up, press it gently home, and we're off and running. That cable's tucked in there out of the way. It's not going to be in the way of the fan. We don't want anything touching that fan while it's trying to turn. The last thing we have to do for our physical installation is to put the components back on the outside of the machine. In this particular case, it's quite easy. That's the front.
Top side.
And now we'll do the top. There it is. Now we'll cable up the back of it, connect the monitor and the keyboard, and we're ready to start it up. And I guess we'll start that next time.
All right.
For now, I'm Glenn Trim.
And I'm Ernie Savoy, and this is this new PC.
You know, this piece of software just doesn't work for me anymore. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a question into that PC Voyage show on Continental Cablevision Community Access. I could be eligible to win some of that software that they give away at the end of the year. What was that address again? Oh yeah, it was PC Voyage, P.O. Box 10486, Holyoke, Massachusetts, 01041. Hit any key to continue.
Watch for PC Voyage weekly on your local community access channel.
Well, we want to thank Glenn and Ernie for putting together a PC. I guess they're just about to the point now where they're ready to boot the thing up and load software on it. So I think we'll see that in another week. And on that note, I'm Rainey Laviolette, and we'll see you next time on PC Voyage.